What is going on, people? Leo here from Creative Tech Lab. You guys have not heard from me in a little while, and most of you could probably guess, but I have been exhausted, just mentally exhausted, and I guess distracted. Exhausted is a word I'm going to come back to a lot during this video because it's important and it is most accurate on how I feel about what's going on right now. But I did feel like I needed to make this video before it is that I just jump back into the regular pace of making videos. I did have to take a break, kind of unintentionally. There's a lot of things that, obviously with all the things that were going on, it does take a mental toll. And then we took a little bit of vacation. And then I feel like this video had to come out before it is that I shot any other video. And this is literally like the 7th time that I've tried to record this. So I'm going to try and just knock this out and express my feelings on the matter, and then we can move on to regular scheduling program, sort of, kinda. In the time that I've taken a break, there's been a lot of good people that have said a lot of good things of all colors, particularly some people from the Black creator community, and I appreciate that. Roberta Blake, Sean Brooks, MKBHD, just some as just even Henny the Business, are some that just stick out off the top of my head. And I still feel like I needed to address it because, for one, just in media, period, unique perspectives and different perspectives is part of the reason why we're here. Not because one person did a review on a lens means that nobody else should do it. That's not how we run here. So when it comes to these matters that are important and we have the platforms to address it, it's important that everybody has something to say, and I have a little bit of a unique perspective as well. But before we go ahead, I just want to go ahead and say that I know traditionally this might be controversial, or people might think it's political, or it's just something that you shouldn't talk about in the same type of like shut up and dribble type sentiment. And I think that's totally false. Racial injustice and racial oppression is not political. It's just wrong. So if you think this is a political issue, or you don't think that people that typically talk about creativity and all that stuff should address that here on the channel, and you don't want to hear about that, and does everything have to be about politics and all life matters and all that stuff, if you're one of those people, peace, stop watching the video. You're not going to like the rest of the video. You're not going to like anything else. I have to stay on my channel, all of that stuff. So hopefully you're watching this video to gain some kind of perspective and maybe learn something or just empathize. But yeah, I just want to get that out of the way, just to say that in no way, shape, or form do I think this is political, or do I want to politicize this issue. It's not political. It's just a right or wrong issue. In 2013, a group of friends, and I guess some of them were acquaintances, but a group of friends came together to create a business venture, and that venture was a media company. And one of the biggest properties out of that media company was a website called Atlanta Black Star. The purpose of Atlanta Black Star was to change the narrative on Black people and to create a reputable news outlet for Black people globally, similar in the ways that you had a New York Times or a Washington Post. So during that time period, obviously, one of the things that we'd run a lot were police brutality videos, stories, all that stuff. And for a long time, it seemed like we were running it on a daily basis, right? So, I mean, all the big cases that you can think of, we had Trayvon Martin, we had Mike Brown, those didn't necessarily happen on tape. I specifically remember when the Eric Garner choking happened and he was murdered on tape. And the reason why that one resonated to me was I remember saying to one of my business partners before, I was like, you know, with the prevalence of cell phone video and with cameras and all that stuff, like some of this stuff will eventually stop. Like it must get better. And he was like, not really. The problem that we have in America is because of racism, right? And because like we've been conditioned to devalue Black lives for 400 plus years, even if it happens on tape, nothing is going to happen. And I remember we got into an argument. I was like, that's not possible. About 3 weeks later after that, Eric Garner got choked out on tape, died for selling loose cigarettes. And we're like, well, it happened on tape. Something must happen. No charges. And then it just started happening over and over and over again, right? So either there was no tape, or even when there was tape, these things just weren't being accounted for. There was no justice, right? Like black people were literally getting murdered on tape for silly things. I think the one that put me over the top to realize that nothing is going to change was Tamir Rice. I think it was right around the time either my wife was pregnant or my son had just been born. It was in that time period. And as a new dad, watching a kid that was playing with a gun by himself, and the cop literally shot him before the cop car even really stopped. It was almost like a drive-by, as Jesse Williams referenced in his famous speech. I don't think I've been over that. However, fast forward to now, because I've been through it so many times with the biggest of stories, again, John Crawford, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, all those stories, to the smallest of stories that don't necessarily make national news, I actually had a process of you watch something and you get outraged. For a long time, I didn't watch the George Floyd video because I knew the outrage that it would elicit. It's really hard to watch a video like that and not get angry. If you watch something like that and don't get angry, there is something wrong with you. You need to get help. However, when the George Floyd murder happened, I did not want to watch it for a long time because I knew what would happen. I think Dave Chappelle said a similar thing in his special. Side note, if you haven't watched that, that's really good as well. But I also had a process, right? Ahmaud Arbery, same thing. Didn't really want to watch it. And that wasn't even police. That was just two random men in his area. But in a weird way, after watching the videos and going through the anger, my mind started to process of, well, there's nothing that's going to be done about this. As sad as that sounds, I've seen it so many times and seen it no justice, no trial. So in a weird way, I was preparing myself for that, both in the Ahmaud Arbery case and with the George Floyd case. However, I would say that this time is different. And it's not just because we've had just a moment when America or the rest of the world, because it's gone global now, just decided to wake up. It's because this happened during coronavirus, right? Most people are still on some form of lockdown. There is no basketball. There's no baseball. There's no football. There's no real football, or whatever you want to call American football or soccer. There's none of that. There's no church. There's nothing to stop you from watching. So you have to watch. And that's where I become a little bit hopeful, or maybe even more optimistic than maybe I should be. And I get to that after I get to this point. I went out protesting. I'll run some B-roll as it is that I'm talking about this. And what was refreshing while it is that I went protesting was that the vast majority of the people were there were non-black. They were either white or Middle Eastern, or there were people from all walks of life that were there, but it was overwhelmingly white. And that is really important. The reason why this one feels so different is white people are speaking up, and that is very, very, very important. When it is that I say I'm exhausted, I am tired of seeing black people get brutalized, murdered, beat up, arrested for simple things on tape. Whether it's for simple things or not, like, you don't get to kill somebody for any reason. That's why we have a justice system, and you should get a trial. But when I say it, or when I keep saying it, or when I start talking about racial injustice and how far it goes into the country and how it's hard-coded into the DNA, and we talk about the history and how we went from slavery to Jim Crow to the prison industrial complex, and we're still dealing with that here today, it sounds like I'm just being a nagging, angry black guy, right? Whether or not, like, some people still today think that. But when it is that, and I'll roll some of these pictures, when it is that there's white people, white women, white men saying, defund the police, fund humanity, they're white people, the retweets are not enough, white silence is violence, or whatever. When it's coming from that community, it resonates different because people can naturally sympathize with them. So I've been optimistic and pleasantly surprised with the outpour of people that have been speaking up, particularly here on the YouTube platform. Just off the top of my head, not to leave anybody out, but Cody Warner in particular, Lizzie Pierce had a really good message. The way the whole, I know sometimes I make fun of the dope squad or whatever in Canada, not because they're not dope, just because I don't have a dope squad. But like Matt Hapoya spoke up, that guy Peter McKinnon spoke up. Everybody had something to say, and that's really important for a couple reasons. One, as your peer and as another black person, it's really important for me to know that you have something to say, especially in this environment when so many people are speaking up. When it is that you don't speak up because you think you might not have the right words to say, I can do nothing but expect the worst, that you might think that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization and you don't support the message, or you think that maybe George Floyd was a criminal, or even Rayshard Brooks that happened right here in Atlanta last week, Friday. He shouldn't have fought the police, and he definitely shouldn't have done that, but that doesn't mean that he should die because he grabbed somebody's taser or was sleeping in a parking lot, really, if we just go back to the start. I cannot help but assume the worst because everybody else is talking up in the community. Every CEO, it's popular to talk about it right now. So when it is that you don't say something, it's almost like, wow, what is that person really thinking? And I know that's not everybody that's not talking up, but I think I mentioned Lizzie Pierce earlier. Her message was right. Like, first of all, she's Canadian. She's not even from this country. I don't know exactly where she's from. I know she lives in Canada. She was like, I don't know, and I might not have all the right words, but I do know is what I'm seeing is wrong, and I'm willing to educate myself in it. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to work to help find the answers. That's all. Like, just acknowledgement is important. Just that acknowledgement is definitely important, and I think it says a lot, and it's really helpful, again, not just for people like me that look like me to hear, but also, again, it resonates with more people and more people to come over to the cause in able to help fight this. Because, to be honest with you, we're not going to fix this in 6 weeks. Like, what's going to become tough is this, when we start to, so right now we're talking a lot just about police brutality, but when we talk about being anti-racist and racial injustice, like, it's almost in everything, right? It's going to get, like, I am so exhausted when it is that you start to learn the history of the country. And it's kind of, when you think about it, how could it not be, right? Like, that's what the country was based on. Like, a lot of things were hard-coded into the law in terms of the way we treated slaves and the way we treated black people as second-class citizens. And even when we changed the laws in the 60s to say that we're not going to discriminate on race, we found other ways, right? Watch Ava DuVernay's 13th. That's a great documentary that explains everything that happened from the end of slavery up to now, and why we're still in a lot of the positions that we're still there now. When it is that you start to look into the fabric of the country, racism is almost in everything. And that's where it's going to start to get exhausting, because a lot of people start to fall off at a certain point when they're like, oh my God, is everything about race or whatever? And it kind of is. Not to the fault of black people, because black people are making everything about race, but that's how the country was built. That's how it was formed. Doesn't mean that it's not a good country. Like, we need to also stop thinking in terms of binary. Like, America could be a great country that did some bad things to become a great country. Now that it is that we're a great country, let's fix some of the bad things. So my plea is, eventually, as I mentioned, right now we're on lockdown and there's not a lot of distractions. All black creators need to find a way to keep this message out there, and dear white creators, we need your help with that. So protesting is not the only way that you could participate. I think particularly here on the YouTube platform, some of us are successful enough to make enough money to where we could donate to some causes, find some good causes to donate to. Right now, me and my wife have been looking particularly into any type of bail or legal fees that could help with that, just because I know there's a lot of people that are protesting peacefully and are still getting caught up in the legal system and may not be able to afford to get out of that. So they may have a criminal record for the rest of their lives just for trying to stand up for the cause. But I think also here as creators on YouTube, one of the things that's going to be important to help drive this movement forward and get rid of it once and for all is going to be keeping this top of mind. And I think for a lot of video creators on here, I think you could lend your skills in storytelling, in video production, and all that stuff that you normally would to drive products and to drive views on YouTube. I think you could help use those skill sets, black, white, brown, whatever color, all colors. We can all band together to help tell some of those stories in multiple different ways. So that's my plea to you, is not just today in June or in July or whatever, but this might go all the way until 2025 or whatever. Same thing for women's rights or gay rights or any kind of rights or whatever. Like, it's going to be a long haul, and we're going to need to help to tell those stories. So I think that's where the YouTube community can help with that, both all the way from the top of the YouTube office over there in California down to somebody with me with just 2,300 subscribers and a skill set. So I don't want to be skeptical in terms of people falling off, but I am a little bit skeptical, but I'm also hopeful that this could be the beginning of a change for us to move forward. And that's how I think we as a YouTube community can fit into that. Anyway, I won't ramble on. I don't know how long that's been. Hopefully not too long. I didn't even get into like some of my experiences with the cops and all that stuff. But just know that these things weigh heavily upon somebody like me. It may weigh heavily upon somebody like you, but it disrupts my entire week. Disrupts, right now it's been an entire 2 weeks, and it really just becomes like a literal weight on your shoulders. So now that we got it off, hopefully I could get back to the things that I need to get back to. But again, just wanted to get this message out there just to tell you where I stand and where I am on this entire matter. But I will catch you in the next one, and hopefully it'll be a little bit more positive and we can go from there. Peace. Thanks for listening.